Hi, welcome to Creating Engaging Online Courses Program Design. I'm Celeste Carmichael, Program Development and Accountability Specialist with Extension Administration. So today we're going to look at some resources related to developing online learning. And I want to make sure that you get signed into our Moodle course with the same title, Creating Engaging Online Courses and Program Design, that are it's on our staff learning site. So we can kind of create a community of learning around this topic and help get you started on building some resources of your own. And I really want to invite you to continue the conversations that we're going to start today with each other. And, if you have questions for myself or for Paul Treadwell, I want to encourage you to reach out to us as well. So here's what the agenda looks like for today, November 4th. We'll check in a little bit on where we are now, and I'm going to share with you, this is a recording made after our meeting. I'll share with you some of our survey results from our poll and our potential projects and brainstorming that we considered. We'll look at some online learning basics and brainstorm a little bit about what has worked for us individually in online learning experiences, what we know doesn't work, and what we're shooting for together. We'll look at some best practices and some templates that might be able to help, and I'll let you know where you can find those resources after today's meeting. We'll also look at some instructional or program design plans and thinking, and we'll take a peek into Moodle, which is the learning management system that Cornell Cooperative Extension uses. So we'll be using the staff learning Moodle, which is really just for staff learning, but there's also a Moodle for the public if you haven't seen that before. So we'll take a peek at that as well. And that's today's agenda. So in our meeting, we asked a little bit about what staff were looking for and what we're hoping to gain in this three-part workshop. And there were a lot of answers that came in, but most of them were about creating an online class for your audience. So that was kind of exciting to see. I mean, of course, that is really what the topic was about, but you never know. People come to the table looking for some different things. So I always feel like it's very worthwhile to check in and see what folks are really looking for. And so it's worth mentioning too that we always try to model in these workshops the kind of engagement that we think really works. So Poll Everywhere or pollev.com is what I used, and there was some discussion in our meeting about Pollev versus other things like Menti or the polls that are in Zoom, and so why we use Poll Everywhere. And I'll just share for those of you that may have missed it. So Pollev is supported by Extension Administration and by Cornell. So Cornell has a license for pollev.com, so you can utilize that. And there's some support that's given for that. Menti doesn't have that kind of support. It's really easy to use. It's not, not to say that you shouldn't use it, but in the question of why use Pollev, that's why. It's because it's supported and there's some resources and some backup files that kind of are helpful and useful. So if you haven't used that before, I would encourage you to check that out. The polls that are embedded in Zoom are great. I use those all the time too, but they're pretty limited in terms of what you can do. And sharing the poll from like workshop to workshop, if you do a lot of these things, is not as easy. So there you go. So there's a little background about that. So in our meeting, I also mentioned that there is a database or a table, Airtable, that's on our staff site. There's the link, staff.cce.cornell.edu, that has been pulling for the last few months, since March, the kind of work that's forward-facing or public-facing from our extension associations. And this isn't for reporting purposes. It's really just a way to provide some kind of indication of the work that's happening, so that we know what kind of support might be needed. And so if you haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to check that out. There's all sorts of filters on here. So you can filter by platform or by topic name or program area, and kind of see what your colleagues are doing within, forward-facing, public-facing programming that's kind of happening out there. And so we did a little bit of a a review summarizing of the information that was in that database not too long ago. And no surprise, it looked like there was tons of Zooms that are happening out there that we're promoting to the public. Quite a few Facebook Live kinds of activities, YouTube resources that are being promoted in that way, some Google Classroom. Not a lot, or from what we could see, not a lot of online courses that are being shared from Cooperative Extension to the public. It could just be that that's not picked up in this sort of data pull that's kind of happening automatically. But it was an indication to me that maybe there's an interest and an opportunity. And Moodle, again, is the learning management system that Cooperative Extension supports. So if you were thinking about creating an online course, Moodle is available to you, without purchasing any kind of separate or different license. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And this workshop, or a 3-part workshop about creating online courses, the second part of the series will happen January, February, about putting it in Moodle. So just kind of planting that seed ahead of time. All right, the next thing we did in our meeting today was we used this tool called ideasboard.com to just do a little bit of brainstorming and talking about what our participants are interested in creating. And I'm just going to share that really quick so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So ideaboards.com is just a quick and easy tool to brainstorm. You just share the link, which is in our PowerPoint, with participants, and I had put it in the chat box so that folks could just on the fly share a little bit about what they're interested in doing. I noted on the ideas board the different plans of work from Cooperative Extension. So if you know me and the work that I do around reporting and plan of work, it's no surprise that I organized it in that way. But I wanted to kind of get a sense of, of which programs may be represented by some online work that is being created. So it's still open and available. So if you're looking at this after the fact and want to add your content to that idea boards, I would encourage you to do that. And the link is in the PowerPoint that will be shared, as well as in the agenda. So you can take a peek and see what other folks are thinking about doing as well. So let me go back to our PowerPoint here. Okay. So let's take a look now at some online learning courses and course design, and what might help you to frame kind of what you're thinking about and working on for whatever resources that you plan to develop. The next thing we did in our meeting was we did a little bit of brainstorming about what experiences with online learning we have each had, and things that worked and things that didn't work, and what our goals are for this particular time, for the work that you're doing. And so you can kind of see here what folks came up with. And again, you can continue to add to this if you want to, but probably not a surprise of the things that seem to work for folks, making it fun, allowing opportunities for people to step away from the screen, stand up, stretch, draw, do some kind of a exercise that's not really focused on watching the screen, engaging people, physical, like some kind of physical activity, using a team approach, keeping it relatively short. And in terms of what didn't work for the folks that were on this particular meeting, there was talk about being overwhelmed by new tech options, Zooms that are more than an hour without a break, problems with bandwidth and internet connectivity. Okay, so that has been a concern and a problem. And in terms of goals that we had, getting people that are more interested in showing up, being engaging, preparing how to prep and offer virtual programming. Those are some of the goals that that we had in our meeting today. So keeping it engaging, participant interaction, physical things to do. So kits for participants to do things along with the instructor. All right. So in terms of best practices and instructional design, I shared a few things on instructional design. So some of this may be very familiar to some of you, maybe it's new to others. If you've been through new staff orientation as a program educator, or have been through you know, some of the professional development that I offer around program design, you'll notice that this is kind of familiar. This is kind of the layout or the framework that I often use because I think it's nice and simple. It's called the ADDIE design. So ADDIE. There's just really 5 steps to wrap your head around. And that includes if you're creating an overall course or planning for a course, first assessing the needs, 1, to kind of find out what people are interested in, and 2, to help them be engaged so that when it comes time to register, they are all in and will help you recruit people, right? So assessing needs, designing objectives, and part of the reason for designing objectives is to let people know that you're you're going to try to focus on the interests that they had, but also so that when you go to develop your actual course and activities, you're not making people drink out of a fire hose, right? So you're really, you can really articulate the kind of resources that are out there to help them learn and to think and not be overwhelming. Implementation, or developing some kind of a strategy for implementation and a strategy for evaluation. So there is a framework for this ADDIE model in the course resources that I'm going to share with all of you. Okay. I really wanted to point out that assessing needs is super important, but in this 3-week course, we're really focusing on designing objectives and developing the delivery strategy to be an online experience. Okay. But take a look at that ADDIE model if you haven't seen it before. In terms of developing objectives, my go-to is always Bloom's taxonomy. So you don't have to be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy or know anything about what that means, except that just know that there is kind of research behind how you write objectives to help you share with people what it is that you want them to learn, and to help you to choose activities that are going to be spot on. All right. And so Bloom's taxonomy is kind of this nice continuum from, some simple things like maybe you want people to remember something, to more complex, like, so in the end you want them to be able to create and build and compile and compose and do some more difficult and just bigger tasks, right? So if I am going to write an objective for a course, if I'm creating some kind of workshop or activity, I might, spend some time thinking and talking to people about what it is that they want to learn about. What do they want to do? Like if somebody's funding something, or maybe there's other stakeholders that are involved that want to make sure that, by the end of this 3-week session, participants are going to be able to, I might kind of look through, do I want them to remember something or understand it or apply it? And then kind of build my objectives from the verbs that start with this. And the reason to do that, again, is so that when you go to figure out what you're going to do together, you can really narrow the scope and make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever activities you're building, are going to help you to focus in on what you want your participants to be able to do. So then assessing needs and planning for objectives, developing objectives, the A and the D part of ADDIE, often gets skipped because we're in a hurry to create something. And I say we because, I've been there as well. But I encourage you to talk with people before you start planning a course or a workshop, and really think think clearly about what your objectives are. What is it that you want to see them do at the end of whatever it is that you're building? And online learning, it becomes even more important because it's super easy to overwhelm people with resources. So I think it's easiest to start, like if you haven't started building an online workshop or an online course or online course content, and you want to start somewhere, probably the easiest thing is to start with what what's called topic planning, much like an activity, right? Or a workshop. So if you were inviting somebody in for a 2-hour workshop, you would start with some kind of a lesson plan or a topic plan. So that's where I would encourage you to start for this series, unless you have, a few of you I think are involved in developing a bigger curriculum, and you might think bigger, but for those of you that are new to this, I would encourage you to start with topic planning. So when you're thinking about a topic, you're going to think about including a few things. And if you're a nutrition educator, you may be familiar with the 4A method of lesson planning. You'll notice that this is very similar. They're not called A's, but very similar. You're going to start by any particular topic, connecting to your learners. So asking them a question, doing a poll, some kind of a forum, anything where they can talk to each other, and you're inviting their brain to be in the room with you and in the same space. Okay, so connecting is super important. The bottom line of any kind of learning, whether it's online or in person, is keeping it as relational as possible. People are human beings and they want to connect to each other. So start with some kind of connection activity in your online topic. And then you're going to think about adding new information. Go back to that objective, right? You want them to be able to learn, like remember where, where a website or an activity is, or do you want them to be able to apply something? So when you're considering what kind of new information to add, in the coursework that I've taken in online learning, really they point to 3 to 5 items to add to the adding new information in terms of readings or videos. So nothing too much more than that, okay? Which is really hard because there's a lot of good resources, but be very vigilant about collecting the resources that are really important to whatever your objectives are. And on the videos, like 5 to 10 minutes tops, unless it's a longer, if everybody's watching a specific movie to reflect on or something, that might be different. But typically, if you're teaching somebody to do something discrete, something very specific, your videos or tutorials can be pretty short. So adding new information. So connecting, adding new information. Also understanding the instructor's perspective, or the teacher or the presenter, or whoever is your kind of your lead or your leader or your expert. However you can convey that they are providing some kind of expertise is important. So maybe it's a short written introduction, or it's a video. Maybe it's you doing a short video just to kind of provide a little bit of instructor's perspective. That's important. Giving them an opportunity to apply whatever lesson it is. So, I wrote assignment here. You might think of a different word so you don't scare somebody away if it's a non-formal education experience, but an opportunity to apply whatever lesson it is. And then an opportunity to reflect, like, what do you hope that, you want to know from the participants? What's their intention for, once they step away from the online experience? What do they plan to do? And so I often think about ways that they can talk with one another, or share whatever they're learning with somebody else. And you'll see that appear later on in this slide set. I kind of want to know that people are working, talking out loud, thinking out loud, working out loud about whatever it is that they do, mostly because there's research that says when we do that, we're more likely to apply an intention. All right. In the Google folder, there is a blank template for planning for a course topic. And you don't have to use this. It's just kind of there in case it helps you to plan for what it is that you've worked on. So just a blank template that covers the items to include in a topic like the last page. So some of you are planning for bigger courses, and you know, you might be thinking more about a syllabus, right? So a series of activities, a lot of activities that are going to kind of be tied together, woven together to really focus on some bigger objectives. All right, so there's a draft of a syllabus plan in the folder as well. And that includes a few other things like a course description and some outcomes that you hope to achieve. There's some information in there on how to plan for inclusiveness and, you know, diversity. And so, you know, you don't have to write all of these things. They're really intended, this is intended to be a tool for you to use. I have found when I kind of write it all out and scope it all out, it helps me when I'm trying to pitch something to stakeholders or to get buy-in from others. So taking the time to write it out and really think clearly about what the course objectives are and the course description can be useful. So there's a draft of a syllabus planning for course in the folder. Okay, then we took a break. And then we started noodling a little bit on Moodle. And I mentioned that Moodle is the learning management tool that we use, the learning management system that we use in Extension for offering courses, workshops, trainings. There's two versions of Moodle. And if you look in the top of the header for either of them, you will kind of see on this one, it says CCE Learning Online. That is a public facing, or it's Moodle courses that you can create for the public, promoted and you know, get buy-in and all of that good stuff. There is also another Moodle where our course is going to be that's really just for staff learning, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, but stafflearning.cce.cornell.edu. All right, let's see, there's opportunities to register, sections that are completed, so you can add in some badges if you want people to know kind of where they are and as they've completed some things. So you'll see in here forum, right? So we introduced a topic with a forum. There's a little bit of information in terms of an FAQ, some adding information through video and some other resources, but that's just an example of a course, and that's the Exploring Extension and our Volunteer Opportunities course that's intended to help new volunteers become acquainted with opportunities within cooperative extension. So when I say Moodle, a lot of times people say, well, why use Moodle? Can I use Canvas? Can I use Blackboard? You know, can I use Teachable? You can use anything you want to. Most of them are licensed, you know, require a specific license that costs money. So Moodle is the learning management system, or LMS, that's supported by Extension Administration. So if your association wanted to create a course within Moodle, you don't have to pay extra for it. It's all part of what we can do, and some assistance that can be provided to you for creating a Moodle and using Moodle, right? So we're going to be using Moodle so you can get a chance to play around with it a little bit that way. It's really intended for more than a one-shot presentation. So if you're creating a course that's intended to build a learning management, a learning experience for, you know, people that are enrolled in that course or participants that register for a course, it could be a very good way for you to house all of the information in one spot, build that community of learners so people can talk with one another, and give a group an extended period of time to learn about something. So not just a one-shot deal like Zoom, although Zoom is a great place to record things and to have meetings and all of that good stuff. So well-developed LMS is a good opportunity to build out topics. You can communicate with people that have registered, track participation, build in engaging content. There is an application within Moodle called H5P that lets you do some knowledge checks and share information and content in a more visual way. So it's kind of neat. And, you know, just a note too, that if you're using a different learning management system, you can follow the lesson planning that we're talking about. The best practices really apply to anything. They're all very much the same. They're just on the back end a little bit different, but on the forward facing end, on the public side, they all have the same features and applications. Okay, so the best advice that I can give is to build content before you build a course. And I said this, you know, some of you have heard me say this before. I'll say it again, build the content before you build a course. And, you know, just you can build the content and invite people in and kind of keep on going. I mean, that will happen and it can happen. But what you want to avoid doing is overwhelming folks with just too many resources. So building the content before you build a course is a good idea, especially the first time around. So we're going to take a look at a Moodle course now. We'll go to the staff learning course. So, all right. So this is stafflearning.cce.cornell.edu. And just, I'm going to grab an arrow here so you can see when you log in, you should log in up top and you'll see your name. And if you have a picture in there, you'll see your picture. But make sure you're logged in when you go there, and you're going to use your NetID and your NetID. It should be automatic. You shouldn't have to enter in a password. Once you're registered in Moodle, it will connect to your NetID and password. Okay. So again, this is staff learning, right? And the URL is stafflearning.cce.cornell.edu. So 2 instances of Moodle operating. Staff learning, the benefit is you don't have to remember a separate password. And it's really only for our staff. It's intended for our staff. So the course number that we're going to be focusing on is course number 280. It's creating engaging online courses, program design. So if you were coming here, I'm going to send you a link directly to get into this course. But know that you can use the search courses, this little area here. If you wanted to search and find it, you can remember where you are or anything like that. And then the other thing to know is you need to be registered for this course in order to receive any announcements that get sent or to do any of the exercises that are in here. So if you were going to register, I'm going to switch my role to show you what it looks like if I am a guest, because the first time you're here, you're going to be a guest. You're going to click on administration and then enroll me in this course. And then click on enroll me. Okay. And when you do that, you will become a course participant. And like I said, you will receive any of the messages that get sent out and have access to all of the links that are in here. Okay. So that's the content that we're going to be using. And so in staff learning, you may be familiar with staff learning because if you've been around for a while, we've done our system conferences through staff learning. We have resources that are involved in there. And there's new staff courses that are involved in that are on stafflearning.cce.cornell.edu, so on and so forth. Okay. The other instance of Moodle is at moodle.cce.cornell.edu. And there are a variety of courses that are offered to the public. If you have something you're looking for, you can search in there. So Master Gardeners Volunteers have a number of courses there. 4-H staff, we just ran a course called 4-H staff creating a Moodle course for projects. You know, and you can kind of, if you scroll down, you'll see a number of different opportunities here. What we looked at a few minutes ago was the exploring extension and our volunteer opportunities. All right. So Some of these are courses that you have to register for, and some of them are kind of open that anybody can see and find. But I wanted to make sure that I pointed out that there's 2 instances of Moodle. And in both cases, you will have to log in to use them in the Moodle that's open to the public. It doesn't automatically log you in with your NetID. So just ask if you have questions about that. If you do create a course for the public, this is the place that you will be creating the course, is in this instance of Moodle. Okay. I'm going to go back to my slides. That was our tour of Moodle for today, and just offered a little bit of homework at the end of today's session. One is be sure you can log into stafflearning.cce.cornell.edu and register for our course. I'm going to send out a survey that you'll receive by Friday, and I'd like for you to complete that just to help me know a little bit more what your interests are by the end of our 3 times together. And I want you to think about the online content that you might develop in your objectives, right? So I mentioned objectives and learning using Bloom's taxonomy to think clearly about what is it that, so maybe your course is in how to make a chocolate chip cookie, right? And your objectives might be that people are creating a chocolate chip cookie, or maybe your objective is that they can find references for how to create, how to bake, right? Or maybe it's that they get excited about baking. So you want to be clear about what your objectives are, so you know what kind of experiences you're going to be creating for people. And then if you can connect to 2 people about what you've learned or what you don't understand, and those 2 people could be Paul Treadwell or myself, but they could also be each other, or a spouse or a neighbor, but just, hey, what do you know about online learning, right? So you just want to talk to people, because there is research that says that learning things, things stick better when we talk about them, when we communicate what our questions are, when we learn from one another. So that's my hope for the end of this session. All right. So just kind of a promotion that we have a part 2. We have 2 more times that we're meeting for this session, but also there's a part 2, which is creating your course in an LMS, which is Moodle, and that is in January and February. So you can go ahead and register for that if you're interested in that. I invite you to continue the conversation wherever you'd like to, and the course references, the resources can be found in our Google folder, which will be linked from our Moodle site. That's it. Thanks, folks. Appreciate your participating and watching.